Okay, students, so here's the homework for this week. Question: at the end of 2015, Greece's public debt was 176% of GDP, while Japan's debt ratio was 248. So already you've got a significantly greater amount of debt for Japan than Greece. Evaluate the likely impact of measures which a government could take to reduce the economy's national debt. Refer to a developed economy of your choice. So you've got two developed economies there. You could refer to Greece or Japan. You could potentially talk about the UK, although you wouldn't maybe know the specific figures, but we have implemented austerity to try to solve that. Evaluate being the question word there, which means that we are looking at two sides. One side being the impact being a good thing for the economy, so impacts that are beneficial, and the other side being impacts that may be detrimental to the economy. The case study itself gives you some wider information on Greece. So it's talking about Greece taking the single currency and hugely increasing public spending. So that would indicate that they have spent more than they've taken in taxes, leading to this debt. Then it says during the financial crisis, the cost of borrowing rose and the country's debt got to a point where it was no longer able to repay its loans, and it was forced to ask for help from the European partners and the IMF. Fiscal austerity was demanded in 2011. This involved privatisation of government industries, so we've got some application there, some examples of how we cut the debt, raising of taxes and cuts to government spending through job losses. However, this led to a recession which reduced GDP by 25%, raised unemployment and led to a further rise in national debt. So again, we've got the negatives and the positives within that, but we need to explain those in economic terms and use aggregate demand and supply graphs to explain that as well. The benefits of cutting government spending and raising taxes, in theory, come in the longer term, in terms of being able to increase government spending in the future. So there's an opportunity cost if you are spending money on paying back debt rather than spending money on public services, on public goods and so on. The other thing you don't have is debt interest. So it does mention that Greece's debts became unable to be paid back because the interest on their debt rose significantly. The UK is on this chart here. You can see our debts have risen, so you could use them. The majority of countries' debts have risen apart from Germany, which is managing to kind of control its debt quite well. You have evidence there for the increase in unemployment if you want to use figures. So 2013, after the austerity started, unemployment rose to nearly 60% of young people for the whole economy. It rose to nearly 20%, whereas the EU average is around 10%. So you could explain that with less aggregate demand leading to unemployment in the economy, and then explain why higher unemployment would lead to an increase in the deficit and debt. The information about Japan gives you a bit of a valuation. Japan has a much larger debt, but the government doesn't have such a significant impact, or it's not as significant because it sells its debts to domestic investors, so pensioners and people who want to save in the country, whereas Greece's debt was sold to mainly external people, other governments, other businesses, other banks. You could talk about an evaluation around Japan's increasing population of old people, which means that they will be net spenders rather than net earners, and in that situation they may not be paying as much tax as they would if they were younger people of a working age. So that might mean that the government is going to be even more in debt in the future because of an ageing population. You could also talk about it depends what types of government spending are cut. So if you reduce wages but still keep people in jobs, that maybe is less of a negative to the economy than if you cut spending on infrastructure or something like healthcare, which then might have additional costs further down the line through a lack of aggregate supply. So that's how you could approach that question. Another reminder is that towards the end of the week there will be your formal assessment, so have a look at that email where it tells you what topics we'll be covering, and this homework is in for Monday.